What's going on, world? Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I just want to show a few things that I picked up along the way as I was working on my basement project. I'm not a carpenter, so let's just put that disclaimer out there. But I have done a lot of research, and as a matter of fact, the basement was inspected today. It passed inspection, so apparently I've done something right. So I just like to pass on some of the pointers I've picked up along the way thus far as I was doing the framing. So I'm gonna start. I'm gonna name this video the 10 must-knows or gotchas for basement DIY framing project. These are things that you need to be aware of, so that you don't make the same mistakes that I did, thereby costing you time and or money along the way. So let's start with number 10, excuse me, because I'm going to count down from 10 to 1. So number 10, pull a permit. Yes, boring. No one wants to hear about permits. And it's nothing folks want to talk about. But I will say this, going through the permit process, I learned a lot of things. One of them being that my house, which is a 4-bedroom, 4.5 bath, is sized for about 4 bedrooms. So in other words, if I try to go 5-bedroom, which is what I was trying to do with this space that I'm currently filming, I couldn't do it by code. Reason being, the septic system, the sewer system is sized for a 4-bedroom, and so making it a 5-bedroom goes against code and basically makes it illegal. So I couldn't do that. So the compromise was I had to make this a study, as they call it. So study basically means it's not officially a bedroom. You could use it as a bedroom, but it doesn't count as a bedroom because by definition, a bedroom has to have a window that someone can safely get out through, and technically you could get out through this window, but it doesn't classify as a real window. And then the other requirement is it also has to have a closet. So there is no closet in this room. I decided not to put one in since it's not going to be classified a bedroom. There's no point. So that's one of the things that I find out by going through the permit process, and because they made me aware this could not be a bedroom. So my advice, pull a permit, ask questions, and you'll be surprised at things that you find out in that course. Speaking of asking questions, that brings me to my next gotcha, number 9. Check local code on requirements. Okay, well, why is this important? Well, I'll tell you why. This also translates to saving time and potentially saving money. So here's what I find out in that course. Well, I find out afterwards, so I don't want you to make the same mistake I made. I find out that I could have saved some time, significant amount of time, and money because by code, I don't have to do 16 on center for basement framing. I could have got away by code. I'm just fine with 24 on center. Well, what's the 16 on center, 24 on center thing that I'm talking about? Well, 16 on center means the distance between each frame, a lumber that you're looking at, is 16 inches. Okay, 16 inches from here to here, 16 inches. Well, it turns out that 24 on center would have worked just perfectly fine because the local code allows that, which means I literally could have shaved off 50% of the lumber that I used. So in my case, I'd used over 300 lumbers. That means I could have gotten away with 200 lumbers, and when you do the math, each lumber costs about $3, so 3 times 100. So I could have saved $300. So this is important, not to mention the time cutting those extra 100 lumber that took me to get through this entire basement. And pardon the stuff in the middle. This is my excess stuff, which we eventually wind up in that corner over there, which is going to be my storage area. But for now, they have to be in the center so I can frame around, so I can frame the entire basement, which is now completed, thank goodness. But back to my point, I could have saved some money on lumber, and I definitely could have saved some time cutting those additional lumber. Not to mention nailing them, I could have saved nails. So it's just as a domino effect there. So you get the point. So that's check your local requirements and make sure that you're doing that by the code. Number 8, pressure treated wood when making direct contact with concrete. So if you notice, this is obviously any carpenter knows this, but for us DIYers, we're not professional carpenters. We may not know this. So this is important. Any wood that's touching the concrete, those have to be pressure treated wood. Okay, and if you see that that's a different color, that looks kind of like a lime green color compared to this color, brown, whatever you're going to call that. So this is important. Make sure that you, anytime any wood that's making direct contact with the concrete, so basically all of your base plates, those are all going to be pressure treated. Okay. Throughout the entire house, do not slip up, do not miss this. This is it's important because one, it's not gonna pass code. But let's say you decide not to pull a permit, which I highly recommend against. This event in a matter of time, those wood are not meant for direct contact. The non-pressure treated wood are not meant for direct contact with concrete, which means when the concrete start breathing on it. It's only a matter of time before you realize that you could do some damage to your house. So it's not worth it. So please make sure that you use pressure treated wood for framing whenever you're using for your base plate. Excuse me. And that brings me to my next point, which is fire block. Okay, so here's another one. This I find out while getting my home inspected that I had to fire block it. And I was like, fire block? What is that? So let me tell you, if you don't know what fire blocking is about, so you've probably seen this. If you've ever been to a new construction, you've seen the orange stuff around the wood, and you're trying to figure out what is this stuff. Well, this is insulation material. It comes in liquid format. Matter of fact, I have the can right in front of me. This is called gray stuff. It helps for filling gaps and cracks. Fills, seals, and insulate gaps up to 3 inches. Okay, so this nozzle doesn't come with it. So this can, it's a 24-ounce can. You can pick this up from Lowe's or Home Depot. It costs about $10-11 per can. All in all, I had to use 3 cans to do the entire basement. I actually have an extra one sitting around, but that's you need that, and then you need that gun on top of it. That's the spray gun. That costs about I think that was about $40-50. But well worth it. And so the point of fire blocking is to prevent fire. Well, it's to slow down, if fire were to break out, to slow down the process by escalating in a rather rapid rate. So in other words, it's meant to help slow down the fire process, so giving the family enough time to get out of the house. Now, how does it work? Well, you have to do it horizontally and vertically, meaning you have to, every gap between the wall and your frame that leads to the top part of the house, so going from one level to the next, every single crack has to be filled in with this insulation stuff. So I had to go around the entire nook and cranny of the house and make sure that all the corners in the house is filled in with this. So that's what the horizontal one is, the one that lays on top of the frame. Then there's another one, the one that you see that comes down this lumber, this piece of frame, piece of lumber. Now this you don't have to do with every single frame. By code, it's every 8 to 10 feet that you have to do this. So what this does, unlike the one that prevents the fire from going upwards, this prevents it from going from side to side. So again, once you frame this, if I were to break out behind the frame, which again you can't see it, well, that insulation, the idea behind it is to prevent it from flowing from left to right, because every 10 frame, every 8 to 10 feet is contained by one of this insulation. So I have this located throughout the house. So one, I just passed one of them, and then that's another one. Oh, that's another one right here. So there's right there, and then there's the other one right there that I just passed. So give or take every 8 to 10 feet, and then I'm coming here, and then you can see in that very corner, there's another one. And then if you come up to this side, there's another one. So every 8 to 10 feet. So fire blocking, very important. And then the other part of the house that requires a fire blocking is the soffit or the ladder up top, which is where the HVAC system is housed in. So I had to make sure, again, every 8 to 10 feet, I have one of this. So this is literally, you have to cut around this frame. This was not fun, but we got it done. And by we, I mean I got it done. So you cut around the pipe. You have to get really creative. I actually had a piece of wood that I had to draw my idea out on, so I can know how to cut it and how to measure it. So this was pretty challenging. So here's another one. Okay, so there's one right there where I just walked from, and then that's the second one. And then just turn the camera that way, and then that's another one. You can see that. And finally, if you keep heading towards the bathroom, which is where I started the video, and then that's another one. So all in all, that's I did for this. So here's the ladder, and this the length of this basement is roughly 40 feet. So every 10 feet I did. So I ended up with four this. So that worked out perfectly. So fire blocking, very important. Do not forget it. Next, number 6, framing without eye joist. Okay, so when you frame around the wall, generally you have this eye joist, and this is eye joist. If you look at it from the bottom, it kind of looks like. So if you look at this, just from the bottom, it looks like the letter I. You can kind of see the top, the middle, and then you see the bottom. So it's like a capital letter I. So that's why they call it eye joist. So generally speaking, this is where you have your frame nailed to each of this, so you can get your frame nailed up top, and then of course the bottom you drill it down either with a top coin or a ramset gun or any other form or other different ways. Well, there's situations where you don't have one of those eye joists to drill into. So how do you frame around those walls when you don't have anything up top to nail it to? Well, this is where you get creative. So this is one of the points that I picked up along the way. So what you do is you physically cut a piece of lumber and you connect it to you find a spot between the space that you need to frame around, and you nail it on one side to the closest eye joist, and then on the other side you might have to do a toe nailing to the closest piece of wood on the other side, thereby allowing you to now have something that you can frame up against. So that's very important, and that took some research to find out. So framing without eye joists is number 6. Moving on to the next topic, covering gaps around window frames. This is number 5, covering gaps around window frame. So what do you do when you frame around a window, but you just there's nothing you can do to close out the gaps? Well, in this case, the video is kind of dark, but I'm going to show you from the bottom. If you notice this is underneath the window, and you can see the distance between the frame and then the insulation that the builder put in, and it's a good 4 or 5 inches. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I mean, I need to cover this up. Well, what you do is you go your local hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, and get this piece of wood. It's a supply wood. Make sure it's pressure treated. Very important. Reason being, this wood is going to make direct contact with concrete, right? Because we're in the basement. This is the basement, so it's touching right here. This is the concrete that's making contact with directly on that side. So this has to be pressure treated wood. So you cut it around the frame and you nail it around the frame, and ta-da, that solves that problem. So number 5, covering gaps around window framing. Number 4, measuring your frame lumber. This is another one there to save you hours of frustration and time. So you're always told when you frame around when you cut your frames, excuse me, that you measure from top to bottom, and then you subtract 3 inches. Well, why 3 inches, you ask? 3 inches because the thickness of a piece of lumber is 1.5 inches. And you are going to use 2, right? Your bottom plate, the one that touches the floor, and your top plate, the one that touches the eye joist up top. So that's 3 inches. So knowing that, you know that whatever the measurement comes out to be from the eye joist up top to the floor, you subtract that by 3. Okay, so now that we got that established, so I have a piece of wood that I already cut for this purpose, and it's right here. So this is a piece of wood, just like I was trying to frame right here. And you can see it underneath that you have the 2 plates that set together. So the bottom, the top plate, and then my frame. So what I found out as I was doing this is, and something that hopefully others can learn from, because I spent many hours breaking down frames, literally breaking frames, or tearing them apart and recutting them, and basically redoing, so costing me a lot of wasted hours. And it's not because of the woods wasn't measured correctly or cut correctly. What I find out was a lot of times that you have a bowl in a frame, right? Those woods are not perfect. Folks might think they are, but they're really not. They're really not. So this is one of the better ones. So this is actually relatively speaking, this is a straight piece of lumber. But I'll show you a good example of a not so straight piece of lumber. So here you have this piece of lumber here. It looks like a letter C. Okay, and you can tell just by looking at the gap in between that space, and then you come down and you can see how close it is. So this lumber are not always perfectly straight. So why is that important? Well, it's important because if you go off of, okay, measure the lumber and then subtract 3 inches, and that's going to give you a perfect fit, you'll find out a lot of times that you will be dead wrong and you have to go back and recut things. Because what happens is the moment you you cut your wood and you put the frames together and you try to put it up, you just notice it doesn't fit. It's you trying to squeeze it in. Sometimes you might be lucky and you get it in. You're not supposed to, but sometimes you might be able to get away with that. Other times it just won't go in. Well, my findings is a lot of times that's because one of the wood is so bold that it's really, you really think it's 3 inches combined, but it turns out to be about 3 1/4 or even 3 1/2 because it curves, right? So instead of having it sit together nicely together like so and sit it down like so, it's more of a, it looks like that, okay? Like a semicircle, okay? So thereby making it, so what would be 3 inches is more like it comes up a little bit because it's bold. So my advice is before you put the frames together, do what I just did. Sit the plate on top of each other. put the wood in between them, and just literally go through every single frame and make sure that if just like you would when you're ready to put up the frame, and if you can get one of them in, then that's your cue to go back and cut that particular piece of lumber. Okay, that'll save you a lot of time rather than nailing them together and then taking them apart and cutting them and then very frustrating. So that's very so that was one of the lessons learned along the way when you are trying to measure your frame and lumber. Number 3. So that was number 4. So number 3, supervise your contractor. Okay, this is very important. I'm not an electrician and I'm not an HVAC guy, so I'd like to, as they say it, I like to stay in my lane. I'm not a carpenter neither, but I just feel comfortable doing carpentry work, and it doesn't involve getting electrocuted, so I'm game for that. But electrical work, HVAC, I probably could have dabbled into it, but I chose not to. I just went with professionals. So HVAC and electrician came and actually did all the electrical work. But the lesson that I learned along the way while those guys were here, the HVAC guys came in one day. The next day, well, the next 2 days was the electrician because their work was a little bit longer. But with the HVAC folks, they took out my soffit, which took me weeks to put together. I understand they have to do their job, but without any regards, they took out my soffit. So a few of this were taken down, actually 5 of them, and we're talking about, I'm getting ready to schedule inspector to come in, and this guy's basically set me back. So I had to go back and fix that. So let your contractors know if they're gonna take anything out, they need to let you know, ask for your permission, or at the minimum, let you know that they need to do it so they can get their work done. The same thing goes to the electrician. I was very similar experience. This guy's literally decided to help themselves to my lumber, and they started cutting it. And this is some of the lumber that they cut, and they acted like nothing happened. Like this is the norm. Again, these are lumbers I was counting on to get the rest of my work done. I bought them, and if you're gonna hire someone to come in and do work for you, then that's their responsibility to bring whatever it is that's needed to get the work done. That's not your responsibility. So make sure you stay on top of your contractors, and they also leave your place the way they found it. Then the contractors at times can be notorious for not cleaning up after themselves. So I basically made sure that I let them know not to leave my place trashed. So that was the lesson dealing with HVAC technicians and electrician. Point number 2, soffit and ladder tricks. Okay, for those who don't know what a soffit is, this is a soffit. This is the ladder looking thing that you see. That's what houses my HVAC system. You've been to houses in the basement, you kind of see that little bulky thing that sticks out. Well, that's what it's there for. It's meant to cover up the HVAC system. So it's called soffit, S-O-F-F-I-T. I think it's 2 T, maybe 1. Or they call them ladder as well. So the tricks I learned along the way, a handful of tricks. One, make sure that you, if you have the opportunity to use a screwdriver, that's preferred. I didn't. I used nails, but I made sure I put plenty of nails every single time, because again, this works against gravity. So you don't want your ladder caving in on you and falling on your family. So you want to make sure that you have it as sturdy as possible. So I made sure that I did that. So I used nails. I used 3 nails, whereas most other situations I use 2, because these are 2x4s after all. So 2 nails is typically what you need per joint, but I used 3. The other thing I did was I used this Angers. It's basically this material you can pick up from Lowe's or Home Depot, and it is it just helps give it an extra secure, extra safety. So it helps make sure that that's something else working to hold up the ladder on top of the nail. So I mean, I always hear on the side of caution when it comes to safety matters. That means extra nail, extra time, extra material. I'm perfectly okay. My family safety comes first, as I'm sure yours is. So that's what I did. So I put those little hangers in, and then something I've already talked about is fire blocking. Again, this is between this ladder. You still have to put soffit because this is considered contained space, meaning you are going to drywall around it. And for that reason, you need to make sure that you have those fire safety or fire blocking, fire stop, as some people call it, in place. So that's why you have to make sure that you have it properly fire blocked. Again, every 8 to 10 feet is the rule of thumb. But check with your local code. It might be more, it might be less. And the final point is walkthrough. Okay, point number 1. Make sure you do a walkthrough of the house, especially when you have contractors coming in. And again, some contractors are better than others, but my experience, unfortunately, with the ones that I've dealt with, is they don't always leave your place the way they found it, and they're not always respectful of your place or your material. So you need to make sure that you do a walkthrough. The other thing I also notice is as they're doing their work, some things are going to be undone. Prime example, this little hole here, the inspector basically told me that was the only thing that he saw, but he still went ahead and passed me, and he just told me to block it in. That's no big deal. I'll spray it down and cover it up with the insulation foam. But they do things like that where you have to go back and re-insulate because it's your insulation is now compromised, or they do things like the example I made with the soffit, where they rip out your soffit and now you have to go back in and re-nail it back in. So those are just some of the examples that I found as I was doing my walkthrough. So I hope this video has been beneficial to you, and thanks for watching.